I want to start today with a question that I think about a lot. And it's one that a lot of actors I don't think stop long enough to actually ask themselves. And that is, how much of what you did this week for your career actually moved your career forward? Not how much you did, how much of it produced something, how much of it actually led somewhere, how much of it changed something about how you're positioned or who knows your name or what you can do or what opportunities are actually in front of you. Because here's what I keep seeing, and I mean across actors at every level. The ones who feel the most stuck, they're almost never the ones doing nothing. They're the ones doing the most. They're in class, they're updating their reels, they're maybe even submitting themselves, scrolling breakdowns, they're retouching their headshots, they're getting new headshots, they're redesigning their website, they're watching, master classes at midnight. They're exhausted. And when they tell me about their week, they can list 15 things that they did. But when I ask what actually changed this week, there's not that much to say. And that gap, the gap between effort and result, is what today's live is about. So this is actually episode 10 of Powerhouse Conversations, and it's called the 80-20 trap, why the hardest working actors are usually the most stuck. So let's get into it. So before I go any further, I want to just name something, and that is that, if you're someone who works hard in your career, which you probably are if you're watching this, what I'm saying is maybe going to feel a little bit uncomfortable, because I'm going to talk about how a lot of the hard work that you're doing might not be doing what you think it's doing. And I don't want that to land like criticism. It's not criticism at all. I admire those of us who are willing to put in the work to get where we need to go. This is not about effort being wrong. Massive respect for that. The discipline is real and it does matter. And when it's directed in the right way, it can make a huge difference. But discipline without direction is one of the most expensive things I think we can have as an actor, because it keeps us really busy, too busy to notice that the thing we're working so hard on isn't the thing that's going to move us forward. So today I'm going to walk you through a principle that changed how I think about strategy. And it's something that I talk about inside the table. It's called the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule. And the basic idea behind it is very simple, even though the implications are huge. Roughly 80% of the results in your career are coming from about 20% of what you're doing, which means the other 80% of your effort, it might feel productive, but it's mostly just keeping you busy. So today we're going to figure out which one is which. Clip that. So there's a distinction that I want to draw that I think a lot of actors have never been asked to really consider. And that's the difference between motion and movement. Motion is activity. It's doing things. It's updating your actor's access profile, attending a workshop, editing your website, watching a self-tape tutorial on YouTube. All of that is motion. You're in action. You're spending time. And at the end of the day, you can look back and say, I worked on my career today. It feels good. But movement is different. Movement means something actually shifted. Someone new knows your name and what you can do. A relationship deepened. Your materials got in front of a person who can make a decision about your career. You created something that didn't exist before. You stepped into a room that you weren't in a week ago. Motion feels like progress. Movement is progress. And the trap, the thing that keeps so many talented actors just busy and not going anywhere, is that motion is so much easier than movement. Motion is really comfortable. You can do it in the, safety of your own apartment at 11 o'clock at night. No one sees it. Nobody can reject it. You don't get any feedback about it. It doesn't require you to put yourself in front of anything or anyone or risk anything. Movement almost always requires you to be seen, to reach out, to make something that someone else is going to actually respond to make that phone call, to get that feedback. And that's scarier. So we avoid it. Not consciously, but we fill the time with motion instead, and we call that work. Clip that. So I want to share something from a researcher. His first name was Pareto. I think he was Italian. Because this principle didn't start in acting or even in business. He noticed it in nature, actually. He noticed that roughly 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population. And then he started finding that same ratio everywhere, in agriculture, in economics, in productivity research. About 80% of the results come from 20% of the inputs consistently. So when I started applying that lens to our work in the table, it was honestly a little startling because the pattern held. And what we see is that the actors who are really making progress, they could usually point to 2 or 3 specific things that were driving almost everything. And the actors who were stuck were spread across 15 different things and couldn't really point to any of them as the thing that was really driving their careers forward. So the question I have for you today is not, are you working hard enough? Because you probably are if you're watching this. The question is, are you working hard on the right things? So I am perfect. Just checking to make sure I'm actually on Instagram. Looks like we're good. Okay. So now I'm going to break down 5 specific, what I want to call time traps. These are patterns that I see over and over across actors at different stages, different markets, different levels of experience, different credits. The reason I call them traps is because every single one of them feels like career work. It feels like you're being really productive, and that's what makes them so hard to spot. So I want you to just see which ones hit home for you. So trap number 1 is perfecting materials that nobody is seeing. This is probably the most common one that I encounter. An actor spends months getting new headshots. They spend weeks retouching them. Then they rebuild their website around those new shots. Then they re-edit their reel to match the new look. Then they update every casting profile. All of that is fine. Those things actually do need to happen sometimes. But here's the question I always ask. Who are you putting those materials in front of? Because I see those of us who will spend 6 months perfecting those materials and then 0 hours getting those materials in front of someone who can actually do something with them. The headshots are amazing. The reel is tight. The website is so clean. And nobody in a position of collaboration or a position of hiring you or a position of representing you or whatever has seen any of it. This is preparation without exposure. And it's one of the most seductive time traps because it feels so responsible. You're doing the professional thing. You're getting your package together. You're making sure everything's positive before you go out there. But before I go out there becomes a way of never actually going out there. The materials become the project. And the actual career building, the part where other people are involved, keeps getting pushed to someday. So here's the shift. Your materials don't actually need to be perfect. They need to be in front of people. If you spent more than a few weeks on your materials without sending a single piece of strategic outreach, something has gotten twisted. One relationship with a casting director or casting associate or, one relationship is worth more than the best headshot nobody has seen. I've watched that play out too many times to even tell you. So here is the question for you. How many hours did you spend on materials in the last month versus how many hours did you spend getting those materials in front of decision makers? If the ratio is lopsided, then this may be a trap for you. Trap number 2, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this one. Trap number 2 is taking class after class without strategic application of what you're learning. So I want to be really careful with this one because I am not anti-class. Classes are wonderful. I'm in a workshop every Saturday morning with working actors, directors, writers, and we are working on stuff. I believe in craft development deeply, and I think that we have to continue to do it as actors. But here's the pattern I've noticed. Some actors have been in continuous class for 3, 5, 7 years. They're always studying. If you ask them what they're working on for their career, class is the actor. The class is the actor. Class is the answer. It's the main activity. And what I see is that class becomes the career. The act of studying becomes a substitute for the act of pursuing a career because class is safe. Class is a room full of people who are rooting for you, who are telling you week in and week out how great you are. It gives you feedback and it gives you that sense of accomplishment, that sense of growth. And it's great because they're actually acting. You're doing the thing that we're in this to be doing. But the actual business of building a career gets less and less time because, well, you had class tonight and you've got a great critique and things are going great. So the question I would gently put to anyone who is in this pattern is, what's the class for? What is the skill gap that you're closing, and how does closing it connect to a strategic goal? A lot of classes are maintenance or, just craft development, and that's great, but that can't take up most of your career hours. Right? Classes are for sharpening things. Classes are for working on material that's challenging. Classes are for getting better. But the thing that actually creates career movement usually happens outside of class, in outreach, in relationship building, and getting your work in front of people. So if your work is very heavy on class and very light on that other stuff, that's worth looking at. So if you took the next 3 months and really made sure that you redirected a specific number of hours toward strategic outreach and relationship building, what would change for you? And if the idea of doing that makes you a little bit nervous, that might be worth paying attention to. Clip that. Trap number 3 is, I'll call it high volume submitting with no targeted strategy. So I think every actor who has just felt like they were stuck in an abyss of Actors Access or casting networks or maybe even backstage knows this feeling. You're on the breakdowns, you're scrolling, you're submitting to everything that could maybe possibly be a fit for you. Maybe you're at the point where you're repped, but you're still submitting yourself because you want to be going out for things that they're maybe not submitting you for, whatever. You do this for a couple of hours, you close your laptop, you think, okay, cool, I did my work for today. And you kind of did. You put your name in front of people, but the question is, are those people you're submitting to, are those projects that you're submitting to actually mattering? What you're doing is you're sending your materials, even if the projects are great, you're sending those materials into a pile with thousands, at least hundreds of other actors. And unless you have a very specific strategy about which projects you're targeting and why, most of those submissions are going to just disappear into the abyss. Meanwhile, the actor who submitted to a few things this week, but also, sent a personal email to a casting director whose work they have, they genuinely follow and are engaged in and met a few weeks ago at an event, or showed up to a reading for a theater company that they want a relationship with. That actor actually moved. They didn't just send things out into the void. They made contact with an actual human being. So the shift here is that submitting is not the same as marketing. Marketing means a specific person is receiving something from you with intention behind it. Submitting to 40 breakdowns is motion. Reaching out to 4 people with a clear reason and a genuine connection and an authentic way of connecting, that is movement. And movement is where bookings actually come from, in my experience. You will find that after you're doing this for a consistent period of time, you will be receiving audition opportunities that you didn't submit for, that your rep didn't submit for. They will call you in for them because they know you and they know what's good for you. They're going to see a project will come across their desk and they'll think, oh my God, Asia Ray would be great for this. That's the goal. So I want you to think about the last role that you booked or the last meaningful interaction that you had with someone in the industry. And, really think about, did it come from a mass submission? Was it just like a chance, or did it come from a specific relationship or a targeted effort or a deliberate action? For most actors, when they really trace it back, it wasn't the volume that produced that win. Clip that. Trap number 4 is consuming content and calling it action. This one is kind of sneaky because it's relatively new. It wasn't really a trap 10 years ago the way it is now. But there is so much advice available to actors right now. I mean, you're doing it right now, right? There are podcasts, there are YouTube channels, there are Instagram coaches, there are TikTok tips, masterclasses, webinars. A lot of it is good. Some of it's really good. But consuming information about how to build your career is not the same as building your career. And I see actors who spend hours every week watching other people talk about what they do. They know all this stuff. They are informed. They are prepared, but they haven't actually done anything. The information becomes kind of like this security blanket. You feel productive because you're learning. And for those of you, and I very much relate to this, if you're if you're a person who just loves learning, then you're always going to be looking for more, soaking it up, soaking it in, and it feels great and it's exciting. But learning without application it's just entertainment. And, I say that knowing full well that you're watching me right now and this is content. So here's what I'd say about that, including about this. If you watch this today and don't do a single thing differently this week, this was entertainment. And if you watch this and you change how you spend even 3 hours of your week, even 90 minutes of your week, based on what we talk about, then this was useful. The information is not the thing. What you do with it is the thing. So the shift is that I want you to think about setting a ratio for yourself. For every hour that you spend consuming career content, spend 2 hours on actual career action, or maybe even 3. Outreach, creation, relationship building. And if you can't maintain that ratio, cut the content consumption until you can. You probably already know enough. A lot of times you're just getting reminders. It's like, oh yeah. What you need to do is the things that you already know. Even if that means you watch less of my YouTube channel. Trap number 5 is waiting instead of creating. This is the big one. This is the most subtle, probably the most insidious. It looks like this. An actor is waiting for their agent to get them auditions, waiting for their manager to get them auditions, or waiting until they get an agent to start doing the relationship building work, or waiting until they book something to feel like they can call themselves a working actor, or to feel like they can even reach out, waiting until they feel ready, waiting until they feel confident enough, until they feel they've trained enough, until the timing is right, until this thing in their lives shifts, which is like never going to shift. And while they're waiting, their creative energy is just sitting there. It's not being used. It's not being expressed. It's not being seen by anyone. Something that I teach inside the table is this concept of living in creation mode. And what that means is that your identity as an actor, your creative expression, your visibility in the industry, none of that should be dependent on whether someone else has hired you to do it. The most alive and visible and magnetic actors are the people who are always creating something. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're like doing some big Kickstarter campaign and doing a short film. And like sometimes it's as simple as writing morning pages, or reading scripts for pleasure, or doing scene work with a friend in your living room, or putting together a self-produced reading, or making some short form content. Anything that keeps your creative pulse visible and active. Because when you're in creation mode, there are two things that happen that are great. One is that you feel like an actor, not because somebody gave you permission to feel that way, but because you were actually doing the thing. And two, the industry can see you. You have something to share. You have something to talk about. You have something to invite people to, even if they never come. You're alive in the conversation instead of sitting on the sidelines waiting for someone to call your name, waiting for someone to choose you. So the shift here is we got to stop waiting for the industry to activate our careers. If you haven't been hired for anything right at this moment, what are you creating? What are you putting out into the world? What can someone find if they Google you today that didn't exist last month? If the answer is nothing, then this is the trap for you to look at. And the way to get out of this trap is to just start making something. So if you took representation and auditions and bookings completely off the table for the moment and just asked yourself, what am I creating right now as an artist? What's the answer? If there's nothing right now, then this might be the most important trap for you to address first, because everything else really builds on this one. Clip that. So that was a lot. We've gone over 5 different traps. There is the perfecting materials that nobody's seeing. There is taking class after class without strategic application. There is high volume self-submitting with no targeted strategy around it. There's consuming content and calling that action. And then there's waiting instead of creating. If you saw yourself in one or more of those traps, that's totally normal. It's not the end of the world at all. Most of us are in 2 or 3 of them at the same time without realizing it. And, we're not talking about this a lot. Nobody sits you down and helps you sort out the busy work from the real work. So you just end up doing everything and hoping something sticks. It's like the most relatable problem. So the flip side of this is the flip side of the 80-20 rule is really encouraging when you think about it. Sorry, I just need to text someone that I have a phone call with. 1 second. If 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts, then you already have evidence of what works, right? You just may not have looked at it this way before. So we're going to just do a quick exercise together. You can do this in the chat with me. You can comment, let me know. You can do this in your head. You grab a notebook, whatever feels good. So step 1, I want you to think about the biggest wins that you've had in your career so far. Those don't have to be huge. They can be It can be a booking or signing with a rep, but it can also be a callback that felt like a breakthrough, or a relationship with a casting director that opened a door for you, or a producer, or a piece of self-generated work that really got attention, or just a moment when something actually shifted. I want you to take a minute and let a few of those come to mind. Now, step 2, for each of those wins, I want you to trace backwards and think about what actually led to that win. I'm not talking about like the general conditions. I'm talking about the specific action or relationship or decision that put you in the position for that thing to happen. Because usually when you really look at it, it wasn't like some random submission. It might have been that your friend recommended you to a director, or maybe you'd been showing up to that theater company's readings for a few months and they finally thought of you, or maybe it was that one email that you happened to send to that person at exactly the right time. The win almost always traces back to something specific and relational. It was usually a power move, something that involved another human being who knew your name and had a reason to think about you. So step 3, we want to look at the pattern here. What do those high impact activities have in common? I'd be willing to bet that most of them fall into one of a few categories. Either it's genuine relationship building with specific people, getting your work in front of decision makers in a targeted way, or creating something that made you visible in a new context. Saying yes to something that felt like a stretch. So that's your 20%. Those are the activities that actually produce results in a career. And the question is, how much of your current week is dedicated to those things versus everything else? Because most of us, when we get really honest about this, we realize the stuff that actually works is getting maybe half an hour a month or something. Like, it's not getting much time, if any. And the stuff that fills the time but doesn't move anything is getting a lot of hours every week. So what would happen if you flipped that? What would your career look like 6 months from now if you took even half the time that you're currently spending on the traps that we talked about and redirected it toward the activities that have actually produced results for you in the past? I don't think it's a small difference. I think it's a completely different trajectory. So before we wrap up, I want to spend a few minutes on something that I think is really important for us to say out loud, and that is that if this were purely a strategy thing, then this video would fix it. You watch this, you rearrange your week, you'd be like, oh, okay, cool, I'm just going to do this instead. I'm just going to do this instead. And you're on your way. But it's not just a strategy problem. There is an emotional reason why we stay in these traps. Being busy protects you from something. If you're busy, you don't have to sit with the uncertainty. You don't have to face the silence of reaching out and not hearing anything, crickets. You don't have to deal with the vulnerability of putting yourself in front of someone who might not be interested. You don't have to make that scary phone call. Busyness is a very effective shield for your nervous system against the parts of this career that really hurt the most. Because as long as you're in motion, you can tell yourself you're making progress. And that story is way more comfortable than the alternative, which is slowing down enough to ask yourself whether the progress is actually progress. I also think there's something else going on for a lot of us, and I relate to this, so I'm just going to say it, that when your identity is tied to being a hard worker, when being the one who does the most is part of how you see yourself, it's genuinely threatening to hear that doing less might serve you better. Because it feels like the thing that you're most proud of, which is your work ethic, which is like what you've always hung your hat on, is actually the thing holding you back. And that's really scary. So I just want to say that I'm not saying that your work ethic is holding you back. Your work ethic is an asset. And I want to be really clear about that. But work ethic without strategy is like running at full speed without checking to see if you're running in the right direction. There's a lot of effort there. It's really tiring. And the speed is impressive, but the destination is where we need to just calibrate. And I also want to say that the actors who I feel have made the biggest shifts in our work are not the ones who suddenly started working harder. They were usually already working hard, but they got honest about what their work was actually producing, and they had the courage to stop doing the things that felt productive but weren't actually productive. That takes a different kind of discipline, and it's not easy. So here's what I want to leave you with today. I want you to set aside 2 to 3 hours this week. Block them on your calendar like you would a meeting or an audition or whatever. These are your strategic hours. Call them power hours. During those hours, you're doing only activities that fall into your 20%. You're doing relationship building, you're doing targeted outreach, you're creating something that gets your work in front of people, you're connecting with a specific human being about a specific thing. No headshot retouching, no reel editing, no scrolling breakdowns, no watching career advice videos, just the 20%. So what you'll probably notice this week is that it feels a little uncomfortable because you're being asked to be visible, to be vulnerable, to put yourself out there. And that discomfort is exactly the signal that you're doing the right thing. So just try it for 1 week. And if you want to go deeper with this, if you want help identifying your 20%, if you want help building that plan and actually executing it, that's a lot of what we do inside the table. So that's your homework. That's your homework. If you're tired of being busy without results, this is where that pattern changes. The table is my year-long community for actors who are done spinning and ready for real strategy. So that's where we do exactly what we talked about today. Monthly marketing plans that are focused on the 20%. Weekly power hours where you're doing the activities that actually create the movement. A targeted list of specific relationships to build. Real accountability so that you're not feeling like you're just doing this by yourself. If you're focused on representation, then I'd recommend Agent Alchemy. That's for actors where you need a system to find and sign with reps who are aligned with you. It's a 44-day guided system. And both are linked on the YouTube video. All right. So just know that you have everything you need. You might just need to rearrange where it's going. So I hope that helps. I'll see you next week.